Hi everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Product and People, a podcast by Enzo Lab. We're launching this show to explore something we think is deeply important right now, the intersection of product design, technology, and human behavior. As digital products shape more of our everyday lives, the real craft lies in understanding people, the core of every product, not just pixels, not just features, but understanding people. And before we dive in, let me introduce the person who will be leading today's conversation, Amar Srivastava. Hi, Amar. How are
Hi.
you?
Yeah, all good, Rati. Thank you for inviting me.
Amar brings years of experience in building products at scale with behavior lens. He's currently SVP at Scaler and previously founded the Indian Road Safety Council. Over the years, he has worked across government, global, nonprofits, mobility, edtech, always bringing systems and human thinking to the table. Amar, I'll hand it to you, and maybe you can start us telling a little bit about your vision with this podcast.
Thanks a lot, first of all, Rati, and obviously Enzo Lab for creating this forum. I think on an overall level, in the last few years, when we have been, and over a decade, we have been building a lot of products. I think whenever we have seen that there are a lot of challenges that we face on sort of improving user flows and the products that users interact with, the guiding light has always been sort of few of the early learnings that came from how Google and a lot of products in the US was built. Our intention is that as of today, the Indian internet ecosystem is sort of burgeoning. There is a plethora, billions of users in India potentially who will be coming online just in a couple of years, right? We are already at around 700 million internet users. So the idea is that there are more sort of, I think, exciting tales that sit on how the Indian product managers, designers have evolved in terms of thinking and learning about products. They have scaled a lot of challenges. And our idea would always be that how can we get a chance to learn from these so that all the future budding product designers, product managers, founders are able to learn what has worked for people, what were the thinking, what were the systems that were deployed, what were the frameworks that were deployed, and how can everyone sort of not only learn but use them to even build better products from day zero, right? And not to have to go through that recurring iteration for few
Yes.
months or years that takes a lot of resources. And obviously if that is widely available, I think the kind of work that Indian community is doing for obviously building good products and solving critical problems, I think that would become much higher. So that has been the thought process with which we have thought about. And yeah, it will obviously largely depend on a lot of knowledge that is deep rooted
Mm.
in the leaders that are driving today's multi-billion dollars as well as new 0 to 1 startups, and tackling those challenges head on. And if what can be better than having those conversations with them, learning how their sort of journey has been, what are the failures that they went through, and how did they learn, and then eventually if we can pick from there, nothing like it. So yeah, that's the mindset. I think particularly over the years, while building products that are used by millions of people or
Mm.
some very smaller use case, have felt that maybe I was not equally adept at knowing what could have been done much quicker, right? And I think if we can create that plethora or playbook for people to refer to through this medium, I think nothing like it. And it will, I think, really, really be valuable, at least for me, and obviously the wider community as well. But yeah, thank you. Thank you again, Rati.
Thank you so much, Amar. Actually, everything you said is absolutely relatable, at least for me. And I am super excited for all the exciting tales that we all are going to explore from this series. And super excited for today's episode as well, because we are incredibly excited to open this series with someone who has worked so quietly shaping millions of Indians' experience across digital products. So, Joy Banerjee. Hi, Joy, sir.
Hi,
Hello.
yeah,
Hi.
hi Rati, hi Amar. Wonderful
Yes.
to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Joy, sir, is actually currently VP Product Design at Zomato. But his journey doesn't start, right now. It has been started much earlier by co-founding Wood Apple Interactive, leading design at ClearTrip, and now helping scale one of the India's most complex behavior-driven platforms. What stands out about Sir's story isn't just about just the roles he has held, but how his design thinking has evolved, moving from how things look to how things work and how they feel across, millions of interactions. He stayed close to the user. He stayed close to the system and always grounded in Indian context, where global design defaults often fall short, in my opinion. I know that you have followed Joyce work very closely, and maybe you can take it from here and set us up for what we are diving in for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rati, and glad to have you, Joy sir. And I think I've been sort of closely following your journey since the entire sort of last few years, and because it spans more than a decade, maybe a couple of decades in terms of building and thinking about products. I think I know that when I think few years or few decades back when design was not a very critical function to now, at least in my purview, the most important thing that sort of differentiates product and services, right? I think the journey has been massive, and you have been a critical part at all of these stages. So just wanted to understand, sir, that what your learning has been, how has design evolved, and then also I think there's a sort of mindset in the mind of people about a particular or a notion that how product design is critical. So just wanted to understand that how do you look at the entire sort of ambit of what product design actually means, how people read it, and what has been your learning on where we go wrong or maybe what we can do better.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. Coming back to design per se, so see, everything in the world is designed, sometimes with a lot of thought, sometimes without it. Sometimes we're just following what has been built for years and years together without really questioning it. So India again has had a very long tradition for design, and for various reasons. I mean, you had schools of design and art. Somewhere design is a smaller function of art itself. Yeah, I mean, design is a very old, much older than product. We were studying design, then product design used to mean something totally different. It was what is today called industrial design. So I'm not given so much to these terms and these things really, because if you've seen design, it spans most of the design schools really started from, I would say the mother of all design would be architecture, building, these massive spaces, buildings, almost all big schools again, they started from architecture. India again has had many good architecture schools. Design sort of came in with NID and then IDC at IIT Bombay, 1960s sometime. And we sort of brought in, again, those Western understanding of what design is. And it was good. There's nothing really wrong with it. In fact, some of the classical design still holds a lot of value today. In fact, probably even more value, because somewhere, because of this excessive, I think, focus on product design, especially tech product design, pay more, and a lot of people get funded. So everybody sort of wants to become a product designer today. We've kind of lost that value for design itself. What we're doing is a very small part of much larger domain of design. Yeah, so today I see designers trying to speak the language of business. They try to sort of subsume a lot of research into this. And yeah, try to become a little more, acceptable in the landscape of business. Um, I don't know whether there's anything wrong or right about it. It's just that I think there's too much focus on just one little aspect of design, and that's not the entire language, or that's not the entire domain of design. Design is a lot more. And I think it's really important, again, for any young aspiring designer to really understand, possibly go study in a school for a bit, do a few courses, listen to some top designers and design firms to really understand what design is. Again, designs within companies that manufacture maybe or build one platform, one product, again gives you a very sort of a myopic view of what design is. Those are the few things which I would think for a designer who truly and deeply loves design, wants to be a designer, needs to get his blinkers off and understand that this is just really a very small part of design. And in terms of even building what we're building, we're again building a notion which is very largely built by a certain number of people. Some of the larger firms like a Google, all our judgment of what's good, what is bad sort of comes from there. And I think it needs a lot more context because design has always been like language, like culture. It's very, very close to the people of that area. And I think in that we haven't really moved very well, and we just sort of following the same models. And I think that's where we're missing a bit.
Understood. Understood. No, I think that is quite fantastic in a way, sir. When you mentioned right, the how design schools particularly started to teach, and then the aspects around the Indian architecture. Do you think that, let's say, when today's budding designers or the designers who are taking critical decisions can relook at how Indian architecture, or if there are any other aspects that can even give them a broader understanding of the users or how to solve their problems? Because what is happening as of today is that, as you mentioned, right, designers want to speak businesses language. And even, for example, I lead business at one of the firms, Scalar, and we also want that designers understand business. Sometimes we feel that taking that business oriented view actually makes them forget what can be the best outcome from a user point of view. So just wanted to understand that if designers today are sort of prepping up, what they should look at, how can they learn, and what can give them even a broader understanding to sort of come out the best.
So I think there are a few points here. But the first one here I would say is one is design is not just product design or in the context that it is said. So moment you
Yeah.
step out of that
Okay.
context, that design is much broader.
Okay.
Design is so broad, so big that and so contextual, so cultural that people
Understood.
need to solve their own problems. So so if you go into a small community somewhere, a village or something, if somebody sits here in Gurgaon or whatever wants to solve their problems without ever being there, so I don't know how that works out. It's for the people there. You don't have to be so-called a designer. That's what real design is, solving your own problems. And that brings me to the second part, is that design is about people. Design is also, when we talk about maybe systems, is about the planet. Design is also about the resources that we have and how we're consuming, at what rate are we consuming it. Are we circular in our nature? So if you look at a little plant, it sort of grows, takes up resources, gives out fruits, and becomes an ecosystem. It houses so many species. Then it dies again, goes back into the nature, and again, it goes into that circle of life. That understanding is very, very critical, because I think today the world is really deeply fragmented. Businesses, the way we have sort of set up, like if you think about it, how many animals, birds or whatever, they really store a lot of their food every day. I mean, they literally just go out and get their stuff. Very few animals would really store. I mean, depending on the context again, and then environmental factors, they may have to once in a while. But mostly, even if they do, for example, a little squirrel would would be storing a lot of nuts, but essentially they're not really storing them. They're helping is they're propagating the species, because most of the time they don't find those nuts. Just spread those acorns or whatever far and wide. So natural systems work very differently. What we have built is this entire world of the artificial. So and the way they work, typically in what I say in systems design, you have these loops. This is really what called a positive loop, but actually it's an enhancing loop which pushes the entire system towards one direction. And by doing so, it sort of just completely destabilizes the system. So we many times have built a few things which sounded very good, solved some of our problems, but we haven't really gone and figured out the cost for it, and especially the environmental costs. Now, I have no doubts that if you let it be, the world is going to come back, the nature is going to come back on its own. It's the human beings who cannot survive in this imbalance. I think that's for really the designers to figure out. I believe, and it's a little bit of a thought that you must have, that in hiding a lot of complexity behind these little buttons that we keep building, we take away our ability to understand what's under the hood. right? The bigger mental model, bigger system. And that also takes us away from, how the entire system works, right? That, you know, design is much larger than what you believe. Secondly, it is not something that you sit here and solve somebody else's problem. It is, when they talked about human-centered design, it also meant, being there in that context and solving those problems, or creating delight for those people. That's the second piece. Third piece that we talked about very interestingly is the business metrics. Again, I think it's more important, one, to understand that we're not only building for the business to survive. Yes, we are, but we're also, in fact, we're largely building for the one who's going to use that, service. Metrics, I've been seeing that for years together now. Every company, without fail, to a very large extent, will be monitoring metrics which have a lot of short-termism about them. So you would think that, oh, so the conversion metrics are going up, this must be great. Many times, and in fact, you can look at most of the largest e-commerce platforms today, and you can see that they're highly optimized for conversion, not for experience. So what started out being very beautiful, nice platforms, and today are so hard to negotiate, and they're essentially just forcing you to buy more, do more. And if you got into, like systems, and you would realize that growth is a serious problem, and focusing only on positive growth is a serious problem. That's a very destabilizing system. Many times we need slower growth. Many times we need negative growth. Know of many companies that actually pruned down the list of features and they did so much better.
Yeah.
Right. So there's too much focus on this building more features, optimizing it for certain metrics. So when the metrics themselves become a target, then they stop being any goodness in them. Right. What you should be targeting is experience, actual experience of that product, and whether the usage is actually leading to a certain goal. If the product itself is being used differently from what is intended, then it's important to then pivot. So I think that focus and those things problematically, they need longer understanding. They're not a week on week metric. You can't start taking calls on, oh, the funnel has dropped, let me fix it. That really does not give you any perspective on. So data is just data. You have to understand what it reveals. And I think that's where the designers can do a lot more. They can actually pick up anecdotal evidence. They can actually go out and see. They can watch how users use their product rather than ask them actually. So a whole lot of them keep asking them, doing these surveys, and it comes back with very ridiculous kind of a outcome in my mind. So watching people use your product, in my mind, is a far better way of. And everything together then gives you. So when you actually triage, when you put together all these pieces together, then you understand, okay, now this is where I should be moving. Again, I think the highlight should be, the focus should be the experience rather than constantly thinking about short-term profits.
Understood.
Right? I'm not saying the businesses shouldn't be profitable. They should be profitable. But I think many times being short-term profitable, you lose out on something. You lose trust. And many systems, some of the biggest systems in the world, for example, the like button on Facebook, which were really glorified as being really the most wonderful little piece that gave so much, growth to Facebook. It ended up building filter bubbles. It ended up fragmenting opinions. It ended up pushing people into, and a whole lot of people left. A lot of people, my generation, just left that platform. So they had to pivot. And there are many such stories where we talk about metrics like seamless. Problem is not the seams. Problem is when we move from one part to the other part, and that obstruction that we face, right? So negotiating those seams is a problem. Many times these Netflix shows that go on and on and on, suddenly I've seen so many people, including myself, sitting in front and suddenly realize, oh, I have missed quite a few episodes. That's not a great experience, right? So being seamless, and there are many such pieces that we call it intuitive, seamless, etc. I mean, and they don't essentially mean what you think they mean, and they're not necessarily great experiences. Engagement also doesn't mean better experience, by the way. So unfortunately, our focus is on these slightly broader terms, which unfortunately do not always signify what we think they.
I think that is a very, very, I think I would have said wow on the thoughts that you had about the role that design can play. For example, learning from the nature and the ecosystem, right? What animals are doing, how they operate, right? I think that sometimes can be really, really useful for us to understand how systems are in a natural state behaving and what we can learn from them. I think that has gone completely out of the window. I think there is nobody in the design and even in the product, I think, is focusing on it. The second point that I really loved, where you mentioned, right, that how do you sort of, in a way, live your users? So that is how I think about it. That if you basically just live like your user is doing and the challenges and environment they face and how are they using your product, I think that sort of gives you a very, very broad understanding. I'll also share one example about this which I had a eye opening reckoning on. And I think third point that I really love, which you mentioned, right, that long term wins over short term wins, where you focus on experiences that by default actually create the, I mean, if you solve a problem for the users, they're bound to come back. But dark patterns or basically nudging them in a particular direction and optimizing will only give you a short term win. So I think those three are really, really great learnings that I just had. I think one on the second point, right? So we were leading. So earlier I used to head the product design for DoubtNut. We were one of the most used edtech app for a while in India and then globally. And what we used to do is enable people or kids to actually take photo of any question. This was pre-GPT era, and give them a video in their vernacular language, which they could then play. And get a solution. For example, if you're using a Gujarati NCRT, you can just take a snap and then you get a instructor who is very good explaining that solution. Now, for obviously some of us who come from middle income backgrounds, we might have been able to afford a tuition teacher, etc. But a large population in India does not get access to that quality education after school and sometimes also within school, which obviously the Indian government is working on fixing. We used to get a lot of one-star rating, right? That when I click and take that photo of the question, the photo does not get uploaded. And then there was a lot of one-star rating that used to come in saying that when I try to play the video, there is a lot of buffering that happens. And actually, I'm never able to play the video. And hence, this app is a scam and I'll uninstall. And we used to think that the metrics tell that 90% people yesterday who asked a question are watching the video. I used a simulator, and the entire team of 120 people used to use simulators that 2G network mein to video chalta hi hoga. Let's look at that. And it was working, right? And we used to feel that maybe the user has some other problems. It's a device issue. Is it something else? But incidentally, on a user research trip, we went 60 kilometers ahead from Banaras, right? Because a lot users on the app who used to use product obviously used it in Hindi and were coming from the heartland of UP. So we went there and we lived with them in a nearby sort of, it was a roughly a village where a lot of our users and a pocket used to come from. And we stayed with them for a couple of days. And just to imitate that, when do they learn? How do they ask questions? How do they sort of get their phone? So we realized that one, most of our users did not have their phone. They used to wait for their father, who might be a shopkeeper or a farmer, to return. And they had a very short window where they used to get access to the phone. And one thing that was very interesting is that at this, when they were trying to play, and even if it was visible that in their phone it was, let's say, a 4G network or a 3G network, this is back in 2017 to 2019, still the video did not play and there was a lot of buffering. And we said that maybe in their device it's not working. We had, let's say, better quality devices, let us try that. And actually we were not able to play the videos. And that is when we realized that all the concerns that were being flagged, which we were disregarding, I think were very, very genuine. And then obviously kudos to Vikash, who was leading design for us then along with me, sort of figured out that maybe we need to figure out low bandwidth ways like audio mode and maybe a text transcript, because we had always felt that we'll be video first. But then that actually made us took very, very important user-focused sort of decisions that we were building for the vernacular users in India, and they might not have access to the best internet always. So how do you enable them still to solve the problem? That is that we thought that we will always serve them through a video. Maybe they just want an answer and the guidance, right? So I think that was really eye-opening for me. That so how do you sort of go imitate them and then figure out? So living the user is maybe one of the learnings that I just got from you, and I think it reminded me about that days. But yeah, thank you for those three very, very great nuggets. So, sir, I think obviously you have been doing some really, really great work at Zomato, and you mentioned about a lot of things which budding designers or designers are missing and can really help them make. So any nuggets that you want to share that has helped you sort of think of which direction, let's say, Zomato should go in? Also, I think sometimes what I have felt, and I might be wrong, that it's very easier to look at all of these states when you are actually building something new, or you are in a 0 to 1 stage, right? But when someone is sort of tackling with a product that is catering to millions of users, how easy or difficult it is to use the systems approach and sort of go back and do all of these things. So yeah, over to you.
Right. Yeah. So I've not spent a lot of time here, but yeah, but it's been seems like a fairly long, and yeah, I was lucky, or I was like fortunate enough to work with some really wonderful people. And interestingly, yes, I could work partly on the consumer side, on the logistics side, which is all the delivery partners, then also with the merchants or the restaurant partners, and really build, you know, software for all of them, because we are a very, very tech first kind of a company. And yeah, it's very interesting. The product itself is fairly simple, you know. Restaurant sort of cooks it, uh, consumer app, you know, gets all the orders in, and then we send it out to a restaurant, and from there delivery partner picks it up and delivers. uh, but something as simple as this needs an enormous amount of orchestration, purely because if you see the scale of everything is quite large.
Yep.
And in spite of being this huge scale, it's really small compared to what you sometimes see in China. So there's always something so much bigger, and in spite of doing whatever we're doing, we're only sort of catering to a percentage point or so of the Indian population. So yes, I think there's much to be done in Zomato in terms of food, nutrition, and I think in itself, wherever we are, we're trying to do as much as possible, especially in terms of being plastic neutral, if not plastic free, in being, you know, it. I mean, we're talking about at least less polluting sort of deliveries. That's one thing. We try to do a whole lot our gig workers in terms of the policies and all the kind of features that we build for them. And then, of course, there is a certain push that a platform like Zomato and Swiggy and all that we've been able to get actually change a bit of how the entire restaurant business used to work before. And it's become somewhere far more enabled, somewhat easier to actually be in this business and build brands, do it across multiple cities, have many more outlets. So somewhere we're following that, and yeah, it's really changing this entire industry, and then you can just imagine how it's going to be going forward. In terms of some of the work that I was involved in, I think one of the most interesting ones right in the beginning was food rescue. And it seems like a very simple thing, but there's so much work that went into it, and so many people worked on. So from product, from engineering, from business, from our, so from the legal point of view, from so all those GRC and everybody sort of got together and said, how do you build a feature like this? One of the biggest problems is when something gets cancelled and then you're trying to resell, send it across. What would people think? The first idea people think that it's waste, it's food waste. So the thing is, it's not become waste. It's perfectly nice. And so we've got, just to give you some background, the cancellations happen during the preparation. That's one small number, and then post pickup. So once the delivery partner has picked up the packet, so a whole lot of cancellations happen there. It's still a very small number, less than 1%. But given the scale of our orders, this ends up being a very large number. So one idea was to what do we do with this? So everything cannot just go as waste. Is there some way we can actually save some of this? But then again, when you're selling a canceled order, then there's so many perceptions. So yeah, just to cut the long story short, the whole idea was to pitch this. And of course, we have a very short window in which we can sell this. So I think one of the first we proposed that we'll do a slight blocker kind of an experience. So if you're on your, at that time, if you're browsing around, and depending on where you are in your browsing experience, this little pop-up would come in. Typically, Zomato does not do any blocker experiences. So we feel that these are really, really bad experience for users. So you will not find these pop-ups and bottom sheets coming up here and there unless invoked. This was, I think, first and the only way where we actually do a little bottom sheet with a food packet. And then even the thought that went into making that packet was to, one, be very transparent that this is actually a rescue order. Even the name took a lot of time to actually finalize on that. This is you are rescuing this order. We're not calling it canceled order. And then of course it's coming at a great price, so it's 50% or 60% off. So, but the way we constructed that packet was to have that beautiful red seal right on top. So these are little things that tells you that this is fully sealed order, which was perfectly fine, which is going to be delivered. Unfortunately, got cancelled by the user, and we have a few minutes in which you can buy it and we can deliver. So literally, the delivery time sort of remains within the window through which the food maintains its integrity and whatever its heat and all that. And then and freshness, yes. And so that was the whole point, that we are not really sending out spoiled food or waste. So that perception, so it came through a lot of these visual clues, and the way the entire animation sort of comes out, it tells you very transparently that this is a rescue order, but this is at 50% off. A lot of people said, let's not even call that. Let's just say 50% off. The entire play is how cheap it is. But more and more, we realize that people actually like to be part of an initiative like this. They enjoy the entire game, that you just get a few seconds fastest finger first kind of a deal with this. And many times, I mean, every time this rescue comes in, it's a very thrilling experience, even personally for me. So wherever possible, if I can, I'll just, without even looking at what's in the order, I just say tap, just give it to me, because more often than not, you're not going to get it if you're really fast enough. And then also we said, okay, how many people can we really push this to? We don't want too many people to be disappointed. So the whole point was so many aspects. I forget, it's been more than a year back. But yeah, it's wonderful. And interestingly, the conversion, I think, for rescue orders is better than for maybe flash sales, which are 50% off. Similar, it's the same thing. And a flash sale, you have so much more options and choices, etc. Here you have literally no choice. You just buy whatever is coming to you, but still people kind of enjoy it. And every month we save close to 100,000 to 120,000 odd orders, and that's a lot of orders that we're able to save. And every good feature like this, or a sub feature like this, typically has multiple orders of impact. So the first order was, of course, we were able to rescue food. Second was, it gave a bit of a delight to the original customer, who would not get anything back, but we send back, whatever that 50%. So we got something back and we send it back to them. Typically, of course, if you booked an order, it's really next to your doorstep, and you cancel, then you can't really hope to get anything back. But you were able to create some sort of delight there. Third, many times with COD orders, there would be some amount of fraud. Sometimes a few of them would, especially with cash on delivery, would cancel the order, and then go resell the same order to the same customer, saying, I'm going to give it to you 50%. So the entire pain would then again come to Zomato to really pay for those orders. So I think that also went off, awesome. And were able to reduce those fraudulent cases. So every such good feature, I think, typically has those multiple orders of impact, and think that's the fun thing about it. But yes, we had to think a lot about how users would perceive, and we really didn't know how this would flow. And I'm glad it did pretty well.
I think that's quite an awesome sort of explanation. So that how did you sort of came up with this problem statement? And then I think what I really liked is that mandate where people want to be part of these initiatives, right? And how this is flying quickly off the shelves rather than the flash sales that are out there. That showcases that there is some, I think, where whatever effort I think that would have gone in understanding the user perception and those sort of small experiences that you've said, right, that gave people confidence to participate as well in this initiative, that yes, this food is secure and I'm doing good for the overall ecosystem. I think that's really, really great. I think, sir, and when you mentioned about this, right, I think Zomato operates at such a large scale, and same is with the large number of, let's say, scale B2C products in India. In Zomato's case, obviously, we have restaurants and then we have people and who are actually ordering, right? And for both of these things, you also mentioned that I think Zomato and obviously a lot of other competitors have created a new behavior. Obviously, restaurants earlier, 80% of the business was dining in and 20% takeaway. Now, I think everyone is it very, very different. And same for all of us as users as well, right? I think the only avenue was to go and eat out. But now I think the frequency at which all of us order has been very, very different. And then, as I think at the starting of the call, we were looking at that. I think we had around 200 to 300 million internet users just 5 years back in India. And now it is around 700 million, expected to cross 1 million very, very shortly. I think
Right.
the users who are coming in and using food delivery as an ecosystem, I think for a lot of people still, this is a new, let's say, experience, right? Because in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, I think some of them are still getting up to the idea of ordering regularly. So why I'm mentioning all of this is that whenever a product is being built at such a scale, right, where there are new users, there are old users, there are restaurant partners, and there are so many different stakeholders. So as a product has VP product design, or maybe someone else who is maybe building similar product, like for example Uber, they have so many different stakeholders out there. How do you think that stakeholder management sort of comes into the picture? How do you think about all of these stakeholders, and then how does input from all of them goes into fueling the right product experience? So if you could just share the framework that you follow and any example there would be super helpful.
Yeah. So every, I think, company has its own rhythm and the way they do things. Zomato does not have a very formal research team per se, but there is something that we do across all products and businesses and design teams. Is one is, like I said, first-hand experience. So we would typically every once in a while go deliver products ourselves or food ourselves. So we do this whole lot of what we call as frontlining. Now, the frontline you could be doing as a delivery partner. You could also be doing frontlining as a customer service. So what we call as customer delight frontlining. That's also very, very interesting. So the one aspect is actually experience your product, and our product really is delivery, right?
Okay.
So
Yep.
entire orchestration, so one is of course to get the orders in, then of course is to pick that order in, deliver it properly in a given time frame, etc. But it just requires a incredible amount of orchestration and so many different kinds of teams who have to work. I think the biggest thing here is to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Go out, talk to your customers, talk to get their pains sorted. So sit in the customer support, go out, deliver yourself. And then there are support also for restaurant partners, so they also have problems, so there's a different team for that. There's another team that listens to DP or delivery partners pain points, so you do that. So one is that, so first hand experience. Second, we kind of, because the product itself that way is simple and we are all connected through channels and through other modes, we ourselves do, get a lot of orders and our family members, they get a lot of orders. So every problem, every issue kind of gets repeated. And I think a lot of our business heads, our product heads, folks in design, they're constantly watching these channels to look out for anything which looks like a problem or a bug or an issue. So thousands of people writing in every day. I mean, that's a massive source of data that comes in. Beyond that, of course, then you have we watch every metric. We have these little signals coming in to us. Anything little out of the way, then that gets investigated. And of course, you have to go experience yourself. So these are very broadly how things are done. You have to, of course, there's marketing that brings in marketing. So that's a larger market research that. Um, Beyond that, away from the pure play customers, we also have account managers who manage these restaurants, and they sort of come in every once in a while, and they are very, very important source of input to our system. Then I don't know if you heard at some point last year, uh, we got some of these guys. So again, with CAMs and also key account managers, and also these delivery partners who we brought them in as product PMs into the system to help us, build some of those features. So I was lucky to be part of. I was working on the delivery partner features, and these guys came in. They gave us a lot of good inputs into building there. So again, I mean, we know who our customers are, who our stakeholders are, who we work with. It's just you just need some sort of cadence of actually going back to them every once in a while. Even here, what I've seen on Zomato is as people take a lot of pains, and because we kind of work like a startup, it doesn't feel like the huge company that we are. People do, take a lot of initiative on their own. They try to build. Everybody has, so this trio of product design, engineering, everybody has, I think, kind of an equal say in, because engineering again has a lot of context. They have a very deep context of how any product was built, because finally they have to go and build it. So they have lots of very, very useful, very interesting questions that they'll always ask. I think here, at least in Zomato, everybody has a very strong voice, and people contribute to literally, be the devil's advocate before any product goes out. So we go very quickly into the market, but again, we spend a lot of time, making things, refining things, and actually iterating on them. And I think the decision making is pretty fast, whether something's working, not working. So that's how it goes. That's again, this is close to how Zomato works, but different companies have slightly different processes. Yeah.
No, no, sure. And thank you for showcasing, I think, in a way, how user centric and how everyone has a voice. I think in my past experiences, I felt that sometimes at different firms, right, engineers are alienated from the product thought process and then what we are building, but sometimes they have the, let's say, best questions out there which can even maybe question as the main assumption that led us to build something. Sir, while I think you were sharing about this, I think one of the interesting things that we have realized, right, that you mentioned very briefly that I think China has a very large food delivery ecosystem, and same with US as well. But in India, I think things are picking up and the users are very, very different. So just wanted to understand that when we think about the Indian audience as well as global, let's say, audience and the global products in the same space that are doing very, very well, how do you take inspiration if you do, and if you do not, how do you, let's say, figure out what do you think are the differences in terms of Indian users mental models versus the global defaults, and how are all of these things evolving for you, given you have seen such large B2C scale products, right? Where do you think challenges happen and how do you mitigate them?
So, yeah. So if you go to the West, so if you went to the US, there's a lot of brand play. It's a very branded sort of market, and every brand would typically try and build more outlets, and they spread out. It's interesting, of course, and very large sort of multinationals who are not only in the US but they're all over. Local, of course, there's a whole dining experience. That's a different one. So they could be very dining, gourmet. People do typically go out and eat, and more often than not. So, in fact, at some point there was a movement that I remember I was in the UK where this guy was building apartments without any kitchen. So you would have an oven and that's it. So the whole point was to just go out or just pick up a box of frozen pizza, and be done with it. So no kitchen kind of a concept there. So I
But
think
we
that
like
still
our
is.
food hot and fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our foods are a little different. A lot of effort goes into making our food. And I think, yeah, it's a different feel altogether. Asian markets, again, are very similar to us, but I think I've not been to China per se, but I've seen far bigger spread of this culture where people just eat in the neighborhood. We also used to have actually in Punjab and all, you would know this concept that came mostly from Middle East, something called sacha chula. So basically, you
Yeah.
just knead the bread and then you give it to the baker and bake it and then give it back to you. India is just not one. There are
Yeah.
many subcultures and so many things which happen in India. So it's very difficult to measure India as that. But more than that, I think Zomato itself is part of a discretionary kind of a spend. It's not something that you do on a regular basis just to get your food.
Yeah.
Where that is happening is possibly in the top 20 odd cities where there's a lot of movement of people coming from tier 2, tier 3 cities to work.
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
lot of them may not know how to cook, or they won't even have the time. They go out early in the morning, come back late in the evening, especially if you're in Bangalore, like a couple of hours in the traffic. You come back really.
That would
So
be another
there,
thought
yeah,
on
the
traffic.
whole, I remember I was in Bangalore for a while, the whole idea of actually going down and buying your groceries or buying vegetables used to be either you sort of get out of work at the time where you can do it and you have enough time to come and cook. Otherwise, the best way to do it is just order in. Of course, again, I think there's a conscious thing in India is to not order in all the time. We also like our home cooked meals. The markets are a little different. Somewhere they've had, like in China and Southeast, there's been the street culture where people, and they get very good, safe, clean food, very tasty food from spaces. India has not had that kind of a street culture, except for, I think, for chaat and all those little snacky stuff. But yes, you're quite right that the phenomena that the most of our order volumes, yeah, it does come from the larger cities where the circumstances are very different. When you move to the rest of Bharat, so there they cannot imagine. The lives are a little slower. They're getting congested now, but in general, it was not a big deal to just, get onto your bike and go pick it up from your nearby restaurant, come back yourself. Or just go dine in if at all. And there again, in India also, there are, like, I've been to several parts. I see, like in Maharashtra, there is some sort of a tendency to go out and eat. And there are other parts of India where typically people enjoy eating at home. So yeah, it's a very there's no one thing that works for India.
No, no,
At least that's what. Yeah.
no, no, that is very helpful, sir. And how do you think that, obviously, when we compare with how the, let's say, products look like, how the product design looks like for the global
Right.
competitor and Indian competitors, as well as the nature of diverse sort of audience that India is, right? From tier one and then the Bharat users, as well as restaurants and delivery partners. Because I was
Right.
talking partner and they were very poor in English, right? And they mentioned that they use apps and their phone, their default language in their phone is a regional language. So I think those are very, very complex problems. So just
Right.
wanted to get your 2 cents on how do you sort of approach that as leading while you're leading design, and what is your guidance to your designers on how to think about it?
Yeah, very interesting question. So, in general, we have sort of copied the models of apps that's been there in the West. But as you move, say, from little more European, very open, very clean interfaces to maybe in the US, DoorDash and Uber Eats and all that. Then again, when you move to Metwa or those Eastern apps, which are very dense, whole lot of Indian apps are also, they tend to be a little dense. I have not found a very clear reason why we are the way we are, because design traditions are a little different. But one pointer I had was, how many letters on an average that you need to make a word. On an average, a Chinese, I think, glyphs or characters would be like something like 2.5 or something. You can actually express a lot with very few. So they can actually really write whole lot more in a one single screen. In India, I think English being used primarily, I think that becomes around 4 odd characters. If you used Hindi, then it'll be, I think, a little more again. In some cases less, but on average around 4.5, I think. Again, when you move to Germany, the words tend to be longer. I don't know exactly how many characters on an average word, but yeah. So how much can you pack in that little space, because the screen size remains the same across. So one could be that. I don't know whether that is. Some could be cultural down Indian malls. They are like, one after the other, really packed tight. Same thing again, Japan, China. It's a little more open out, more spaced out, maybe in the US. Possibly those aspects, spatial aspects also impact the way we pack our. But I think everywhere we kind of know that the first eyeball, the first screen tends to be very, very important. So don't scroll so much horizontal, vertical still a bit more, but again, the scroll decay is very strong moment you start. So we try to, and we've seen that again and again. Every time something falls below the fold, the conversions go down. So there are a whole lot of those aspects that we've seen. If you're very used to a particular app, then you will use some of these expert features like the search itself. When your intent is very high, then you'll just use the search. If you don't know what you want, then you'll probably start browsing. Uh, it's not just the number. Sometimes a little change in that. So if, say, people barely scroll horizontally on our what we call as LDCs, the entire cuisines. But then once we started putting it up, then people started seeing it more and they scroll a bit more, and the browsing thing went off. So many other metrics also sort of they started seeing a bit of an uptick. Yes, but it's largely, I think we try to pack a whole lot of stuff in the first screen. And whether you're on the browse screen or whether you're on the menu, a restaurant menu itself, and yeah, so because I also feel that more the people are scrolling, the more they're looking for something, they're not very sure. So the intent becomes slightly more diffused in that case. Yeah. So in general, I think there is a much bigger play of a search. So as things become more complex, you need these simpler, easier ways of actually finding what you're looking for. So I think some of these aspects which are there, but I think at least our apps. The second part was the delivery partners and maybe even for a lot of restaurant partners. So we are a very unique sort of geography. The daylights are very, very strong. And most of the DPs, delivery partners, have these slightly older mobile phones that use for work. Typically, the screens are sort of cracked. Now, in the monsoons, they'll also have a polythene sheet on top of it. Right, a lot of these guys actually put a little cover on their bikes so that they can see the screen itself. So last year when we started revamping this entire, and one of the first things was actually make sure that the accessibility is right. So the sizes of fonts, the contrast, made sure that it was like 1:4.5 on at least every color. So they may not look very pretty, but the contrast is high. See, for him, this is a workplace. Like he needs things, and a whole lot of them, and it's a sort of community, they learn from each other. And you're absolutely right, a lot of them do not understand English. We have the option for switching languages, but the problem with languages is many times the CTAs, they start sounding very weird, so people can't figure out. So a whole lot of them, they go by their muscle intelligence. They know, okay, this green button means that. Another thing that I thought we should start doing is don't have too many options on the regular flows, right? So you have one particular action or killing of an action on each screen. So you can have more screens, but just let it be just one each, so the rider understands. Then we also realize that they may or may not always have the right kind of literacy or numeracy. Let's start adding a lot many more voice notes. And those voice notes, even if your interface is in English, you can have a voice note which could be in your language. So you can play them and actually understand what that feature is all about. So we've started using a lot of those voice notes. Again, I think what we need to do more of is start defaulting them. So typically, wisdom would say if the person has chosen English as the interface language, you have your voice note in English. But
Yeah.
that's not quite right. We understand from behaviorally that English is needed for a very different reason, but the voice nodes are again different. So English is because it's easier to handle that interface, but voice nodes is good to understand. So if it's not, then I would default my voice node to Hindi. But I think earlier even these language options were hidden. So now we sort of started putting them out more often. Typically, only during onboarding you will see a language option. There also the behavior is to just tap and go, tap and go. So I
Okay.
don't think people pay attention to what they're selecting, but later they need that to be told more often than not that you can actually change your language. So these are those
Understood.
combination of things, simplifying even the micro copies.
Yeah.
And this came more from our delivery partners. They said, don't write these long copies. Obviously, it's very hard to understand. Just say what I should do, what I shouldn't do. So we actually use wrong English, not full sentences.
Okay.
They say, do this, don't do this, things like that, wherever possible. And I know, I mean, the products, the teams constantly slip on that, but it's very good to constantly be into their minds and write the way they would understand. And it's not easy because the partners are from all over India, from tier one, tier two, tier three cities. Everybody has their own context. But yeah, I think less we write in long-winded sentences, the better it is. The whole point is for him or her to understand what he or they must do, he or she must do next. And we want them to, and it's a complicated handshake, really. Going to a restaurant, then standing somewhere, picking up the right order, then traveling, then following a map, getting to the right place, and then depending on where you are, which city you are, it could be some gully, mohalla, and so finding that and handing over at whatever given time, and so that the food remains fresh and hot. And, it's a slightly difficult kind of handshake that we have at both ends. So it's not the easiest, but it's a lot of orchestration that goes into it.
No, no, definitely. And thank you for walking through the entire journey. I think that entire journey that you mentioned about a delivery partner, right, is quite mind blowing because there are so many different interactions that happen. One of the things that always amazed me is that, for example, the delivery partner may understand the voice note, but how do we nudge the user then to put that voice note in the first place, right? Because a lot of us might not have that behavior that while we are entering, we also put that additional effort of adding that voice note itself. A lot of apps
Yeah.
these days also have these instructions of whether to leave the order with the security guard, etc. But a lot of
Yeah.
times I find that the delivery partners actually still have the default behavior of calling, right? And then
Yeah.
if someone is not picking, then they get worried. So a lot of these challenges actually seem very, very exciting, and obviously kudos to
Yeah.
you and the team that are trying to solve them. I think you also mentioned, sir, about the mental models of how the global apps are shaping food delivery and the Indian ecosystem. So, just I think something that intrigues me is that do you think there is a default difference in how Indians think about their food search on the app compared with how the global audience does? One of the ways could be cuisine first, or let's say something else first, and then that is how they start looking at and deciding. Or is there anything else that you have figured out?
Yeah. So there are a whole lot of these insights that we do have. I'll try and share some, if not all. So yes, we do very often see that at least when the intent is higher, especially when you order from certain kinds of restaurants only, right? So typically, what you call as a slightly higher AOV customers, they typically tend to know what they want, and so there is a lot of that recommendation that goes in rather than just the app itself. There's a whole lot of recommendation that goes into, say, from friends, and every time you need to switch to a new restaurant because it's food after all, and you don't want to have a bad experience. So
Yeah.
either or if at all you want to know, then you would typically want somebody else to let you know. Then comes, of course, the rating systems. So I mean, different countries in the world have sort of been playing with their ratings, but ratings also don't always give you that entire understanding of So there are multiple things that's come into play. One is you go to a restaurant, you are part of that affluence group that wants to spend only $300. Now for $300, you get a certain kind of, say, Indo-Chinese, and you just love it. Somebody else who typically spends 600, 700 has a slightly different, they would want a little less spicy or whatever, a little more authentic as in Chinese. And he or she is willing to spend a lot more for it. They would measure the same restaurant as, say, 3-star, and this guy, the first guy, would measure that as 4.5 or 5-star. So
Understood.
the star ratings also sort of is a signifier of who is rating.
Yeah.
Now, and that also sort of gets baked into, and we have tried with whole lot of things, numerous parameters on which user can actually search, saying, okay, do they serve, how many complaints do they usually see, so on the flip side, apart from the good ratings, how many complaints do they often see, how often, how good the quality of the packaging is, how fresh the food is. We also, Zomato also has reviews on it, unlike other platforms. So we've tried with a whole lot of things, but I think the latest one where we actually started doing math score was to actually understand, what kind of customers are doing these ratings. And then we also focused on one very interesting aspect of it, saying, how do we know whether this guy really likes this food? And one of them is that how often does he, repeat this order? So that's why you have reorder rate on our systems, and hopefully, that's helpful. So we're just trying to glean this goodness and trying to understand why certain things get rated in certain ways. And we want to sort of align that with your own ordering behavior and give you that extra. And then, of course, there are recommendations from your close friends. Yeah, we try to do, try and match that and give you the best match, really, to how much you want to spend and get the right kind of food, especially when you're moving out from, your known restaurants and your known. But we've seen a whole lot of people that typically go back to the same. It's not only in food, it's in companies like Flipkart and Amazon's, so switching from a category and ordering from too many different categories is very, very low. Typically people are ordering books, are generally ordering books. People are ordering something, say electronics, they just keep ordering electronics. So switching categories, super categories is, especially super categories, is very low. It'll be like something like 1 point something. The same thing with restaurants is like you end up ordering from just the top 2 or 3, and if you have a bad experience, then you again move back into the shell. So you order a lot from the same. But we try to help you explore more. We try to explore different cuisines, and there are many more innovative companies that are coming and doing interesting things. So we would want them to be brought to you. Somewhere, if we can, let you know that this is good, and not only purely because we are not really curating it. We are a marketplace. We just want people to help other people choose the right thing.
No, I think rating and how, let's say, a peer behavior on the app is actually shaping your ordering. I think that's a very interesting take. And I'm sure that the design team spends a lot of time in figuring out what is the behavior. I think why also I asked this question, sir, because I see that as of today, there is a lot of conversation around how, let's say, when you are trying to personalize or build this math score, how AI is sort of impacting the, let's say, or enabling us to personalize user experience at scale, right? And there is a lot of conversation around, let's say, these vibe coding tools that are out there, and how you can create UI and very, very simple UI very quickly using all of these AI generated tools, right? I just wanted to sort of get your perspective around that. How do you think the profession of user design or product design is changing using AI? What do you think are the pros, and where it is actually, in a way, limiting the cognitive behavior of the product and design community as well? And I might be wrong, but I just wanted to understand your 2 cents.
So I think the first piece is, let's understand the way we are actually using these prompting systems. It's, to me, it seems like, earlier we had to learn the language of the computer to speak to it. Now it's another wrapper. We now use natural language to speak to it. It does certain things very well, but I think it still has a long way to go before it can deliver something really professional to me, as I wanted, when I wanted. So it's another way of interacting with the tool. It's a tool, and no doubt it's a incredibly different kind of a tool. The 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 scale at which it can do pattern matching, the scale at which it can actually understand, especially languages, and respond to it in the same way, and we can have this long context windows where you can, it understands me for a very very long time and puts everything together in that context. So those are all very very beautiful and wonderful.
That's right.
So these are again the tools. I think it's going to make the floor very very low for a whole lot of people to get into it.
Yeah.
It's also going to raise the bar, the ceiling for really good designers from the tooling point of view. It might also hollow out a bit of the middle, a whole lot of people who sit in there doing here and there. But I think it's also where it brings back the core quality of a designer as a generalist, not just tied to a single tool or certain set of tools. It makes you really question your trade, your craft, your understanding, and how you fit into this entire thing. So that's why I think going back to understanding systems, to understanding design per se, and to understand uh, classical design and its entirety is I think that's a very very important piece. That's where a designer would really excel, when he truly understands what role does he play in this entire thing. Um, yeah.
No, no, sure, sure. I think that is a very, very interesting take on how AI, rather than sort of we feeling that maybe the designers would go away, I think how good designers would get further augmented because a lot of
Yeah.
legwork now can become more concrete. I think that is
Yes.
really powerful. And someday we would also want to learn from you that how sort of this can actually materialize and how things are happening in the real world, particularly at Zomato, and then what are your suggestions? But yeah, sure, sir. I think just I think before we wrap up for today, I think we got some very very small questions from our community. I think one of the things that you also mentioned, right? I think a lot of users mention that late night scrolling, they generally come up and then nothing looks good. Decision fatigue hits it. Everyone after work is trying to figure out what to order, but that's a very difficult decision making. What's one UX tricks that you felt that you, or UX tricks or UX phenomena or process that help or that you implemented that helps people decide maybe even 5 minutes quicker rather than spending 30 minutes and then not ordering anything?
I think I don't know if it's a UX thing or not, but yeah, the couple of things that we did. One, we got our, well, we were I think one of the first to do a dark mode,
Yeah.
and not only for the consumer app but across for the merchants. And we also realized it'll be so much easier for our delivery riders also. So now all our products get built both mode. So late nights, yeah, at least it'll be a little easier on your eyes. So that's one thing. And we recently did bring, like I just talked about, frequently reordered, brought the entire, the all the cuisines right on top. So it just gets a, one fixed place from where you can sort of manage the entire app. Earlier, it used to be a little down the, scroll and things like that. So bit of that just to help you, at least get into the mood of saying, okay, what do I want to have today, Chinese or Burmese or whatever. So a bit of that, but I think largely for late nights, I think that's what it is.